I'm chatting to PSG Konsult CEO Francois Gauss. Francois, you released annual results today, and it appears that the business has been pretty resilient despite COVID-19.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. The business has done well in all of our divisions. So we not only produced good earnings growth, but we had adequate margins and a very good return on equity of almost 20%.
What, if any, is the measurable impact of the pandemic? Are there any specific areas of the business that were affected?
A lot of companies have commented on resilience and moving to digitization and so on. Our own view is in planning and foresight. We like to look forward. We like to think ahead. And, what put us in the position to deal with COVID was really planning and execution, which occurred almost, and based on decisions 3 or 5 years ago, making sure that we had strong systems and infrastructure, reporting capabilities, digital channels, and so on. And then really what COVID itself was all about was just the execution of the capabilities that we built over a very long period of time. So luckily, all of that foresight paid off, and that's what underpinned the results and underpinned the flows which we reported on.
Looking back 6 months, your first half performance was adversely impacted by falling interest rates. That reduced your net investment income. You also had to give support to clients through premium relief. There were business interruption relief payments and other measures. I presume those reduced and got better as the year progressed.
Yes. So the first 6 months was a pretty extreme period. There was all sorts, all the difficulties that you mentioned, plus a virtual standstill in general activity. And then gradually things started to improve. There was first a period of 3 months where things started to gradually open up. And then in the last 3 months or so, December, January, and February, we started to see some very strong inflows and a return to normality. So that was not just in terms of activity levels, but it was also in terms of market levels, because what you saw, notwithstanding lower interest rates, you saw a very strong rally in the equity markets, not just in the domestic equity markets, but also in the international equity markets. And that continued into Jan and Feb, and resulted in the very high asset.
Francois, you talked about equity markets recovering. How has that impacted your asset management business? Because that was, again, the laggard, impacted by challenging market conditions, and you didn't earn any performance fees in the first half of the year because you didn't meet your benchmarks. How has that improved in the second 6 months?
So first of all, the asset management is a relatively small contributor to overall profits, about 15% of overall profits. Wealth management is 65%, and the insurance business about 20%. So a relatively smaller component that benefited from the recovery in the way that I described with the development that we saw in equity markets. But the key reason why we underperformed in asset management was because we were optimistic about the recovery in South Africa much earlier than other asset managers. And so coming into COVID, we had already underperformed. And as a consequence of that, we had lost some assets. And then, of course, by the time that the market recovery had come and we started to outperform again, there was a lag in terms of the recovery that we saw in terms of inflows. But that's just the normal cyclicality that we've seen over a number of cycles in terms of the asset management business. And our own view is that following the recovery that we saw in returns, that inflows will come back into the asset management business.
So it's looking a bit better at this stage.
Well, it's past returns are never a good indicator of future returns, but it's certainly a good indicator of future flows. And because of the very good inflows, as very good returns that we saw over the last year or so, that recovery which I spoke about, the flows have followed that. And, over a very long period of time, our asset manager has always been able to deliver alpha. And so consequently, I'm hopeful that this recovery that we've seen will continue.
Okay. I mean, your insurance business, PSG Insurance, that's a relatively new business. You have bulked it up with the purchase of ABSA Insurance and Financial Advisors a few years ago. It's more of a brokerage, isn't it? So how does that get impacted by COVID? Because we have seen the business interruption claims against short-term insurers. Does that affect you?
The key in terms of the brokerage business is really in terms of a slowdown in the general economy. So it becomes much harder to reprice premiums naturally if there's economic downturn. Customers are under pressure, so there's cancellations of premiums and so on. And that's really where we saw the effect on the short-term insurance side is the general distress that coincided with a difficult economic environment. So unlike the asset-intensive businesses like the wealth business and the asset management business, the insurance business is much closer linked to real economic activity. And so anything that's detrimental to that economic activity in the ways that I've described, has impacted our insurance business.
Francois, you say in today's commentary that you have a relatively small market share in all divisions and you'll continue to prioritize organic growth. How about acquisitive growth due to your strong capital position? Is that something you're also considering?
So we've always focused on organic growth. We think it's more sustainable. We think it's lower risk, and it's easier to generate repeatable revenues if you've got an organic growth strategy. So from time to time, if it's really attractive and provided it meets various criteria, we do adequate due diligence. It has a sound strategic rationale. There's adequate synergies. We can immediately integrate the businesses, and it's at a reasonable price. Then, of course, we would consider those acquisitions, but it's very rare for that very high hurdles which we set ourselves to be to achieve those hurdles. And so for that reason, it's highly unlikely that we'll have a very aggressive growth strategy. But obviously, in the past, we have done those businesses, and for that reason, we're gonna continue to focus on organic growth, and it's stood us in good stead. Our compound growth rate in terms of earnings is 15% over the last however many years, and our share price have appreciated at quite a rapid rate. So we feel you need to be patient to generate good long-term returns, and the organic strategy is what we think will deliver that, rather than a very aggressive growth strategy driven by acquisitions.
How are things looking for the year ahead? Would you expect to continue the growth rate you're seeing at the moment?
I mean, we can't predict the future, but we've grown very aggressively, organically, albeit over the last number of years, and we see no reason why that won't continue. I mean, we're optimistic. We've got a very strong capital position. The economy in South Africa and financial services have been disrupted, and that affords us countless different opportunities. So we intend to take advantage of that, and we think it's going to be good for business and good for growth. We always want to be strong or relatively stronger when other people are weak or relatively weaker. So we feel that we're in a good position, and we're optimistic.
Francois, we have to leave it there, but thanks very much for your time.